Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Justin the Food Entrepreneur Show. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host. That's Bizzarro. For anyone who's out there, you can find us on Instagram at Justin the Food Entrepreneurs and at Justin Bizzarro. That's two Z's, two R's. Again, for everyone out there, you can also find our community, education, networking, all the stuff out there for food and beverage entrepreneurs, restaurateurs, hospitality, nutrition, farmers, wherever you guys are sort of in the chain of the food industry or beverage industry. As entrepreneurs, there is space for you there in Gorilla Brave, and that is out there for everyone to go to. Also, you can find this show and the other shows we do on Spotify or wherever else you grow yourself through podcasts. So that being said, I have a very cool guest with us, Reed from Virginia's in New York City. How are you doing today, Reed?
Doing very well, Justin. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Let's talk about your story. Let's talk about your journey from little Reed to big Reed to entrepreneur Reed to restaurateur Reed. Well, however you see yourself, let's talk about that, because I think it's a really cool journey. You have a really cool concept, really cool restaurants, very popular. If anyone who goes to New York City, I recommend it. So let's talk about this whole journey of yours and dive right in.
Yeah, so I didn't know what I wanted to do in college. I started working at a restaurant with a really big wine cellar called Burns Steakhouse in Tampa to learn about wine, and I discovered that I really liked it, and I said, why don't I see if I like this as a career? So I did an internship at Charlie Trotter's in Chicago and kind of fell in love with it and was kind of, taken by it. So I considered hospitality school and that kind of thing. And Chef Trotter said, you don't need any of that. Come back and work for me. I'll teach you everything you need to know. So that's what I did right after college. Came back and worked as like a glass polisher, server assistant, which is what they call like a busser, kind of server assistant, server, and then manager. Well, I was never really a manager in Chicago, but helped with some, managerial events and that kind of thing. Part of the wine team, did everything. And then they moved me out to Las Vegas for a year and a half, where I was a manager. It was a great learning experience, but I hated Las Vegas. Came back to New York, where I'm from, worked for Jean-Georges for a few years and opened the Mark Hotel and the Mark Restaurant by Jean-Georges. And then I moved downtown to work at La Conda Verde by, Andrew Carmelini and Robert De Niro. And was there for several years before opening my own place, Virginia's, which was always the goal, was to open my own restaurant, or restaurants, plural. So Virginia's opened originally in 2015 on 3rd Street and Avenue B. We closed that location in 2021 and reopened Virginia's in a new location in 2022. So I guess we closed it we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary. So we reopened in 2020. Oh, it's 2025 now. We reopened in 2023. I'm still thinking it's 2024. So we reopened it in 2023, in March of 23. So we're coming up on our 10-year with an asterisk anniversary in May.
Why the change of location?
So it was a location. Everybody thinks that it was COVID. It wasn't COVID. It was still sort of COVID was happening, Omicron, which was kind of a nightmare. But we were doing well, just not really that well. And the location was really tough. So we were popular. We did well Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and there were peaks. But overall, we would have a slow January Tuesday, and we'd do like $300 in sales. And then Friday would come around, and we'd do 120 people, and it'd be good. But you just can't run a business like that. I think we were closed on Sunday nights as well. We did brunch only.
And you were in Avenue B, so you're down in Alphabet City? Is that where you were?
We still are. We're on 3rd Street and near Avenue B, but we were on 11th and C. And just as you know, Justin, you said you lived in New York for a while. You could be on one corner, and then the restaurant 2 blocks away could be completely dead. So it's very, location's very important in New York City. So
that's crazy to an extreme. You would just never imagine within 500 feet of each other on the opposite side of a building would be that much difference in foot traffic and business, but it matters. It does.
And so we lease was up, and I tried to negotiate, and the landlord wouldn't. And I said, you know what? I'm done. I've had a hard time with this location since the beginning. Omicron was going on. My wife was pregnant at the time. So I guess all of those things just contributed to me saying, you know what? It's time for a change.
Oh gosh, I bet that was fun, stress wise. Let's
You know
go.
what? The most stressful thing was right after closing and clearing out the place and everything like that. It was the year, I guess we closed New Year's Eve and signed a lease in June or something like that. So it was like 6 months of soul searching and trying to figure out, am I going to do it again? What am I going to do? Am I going to get a job? What am I going to move? What's going to happen next? And I learned something about myself, and it's that I need to be busy and I need to be working, because that was a really hard time for me.
Yeah, I think working, we find a lot of balance in it. Gives us a lot of purpose in our family, providing. I like this. Let's talk a little bit about experience, growth, mentorship. You talked about a little bit of that, but I want to narrow in on it from a leadership standpoint, from an entrepreneur standpoint. Let's talk about influences, role models, mentors, the significance of what they taught you, but specifically some of the things that you still carry with you today. And then we'll get back into the story, because I want to talk about you opening the new place.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely picked up a lot of very different experience along the way. So, I started in Charlie Trotter's with no experience, and the mentorship and the leadership that I got there was different than New York, but it's still very valuable today. So when you work for somebody that's in fine dining at that level, like Charlie Trotter's, you learn that, what Charlie really instilled in me and the people that I worked under at Charlie Trotter's was really this sort of philosophy that the dumpster in the back, the employee restroom, the changing area is no different than the host stand or the place setting, or anything that goes on in the dining room. So everything is equally important, and it's a philosophy that I still try to instill in my team, and I take very seriously. It all matters, right? So if you go to a restaurant and the bar is beautiful and the staff is in great uniforms, but you go into the bathroom and it looks like crap, or you're walking in and the front door is dirty, like, every single detail matters. Nothing is more important than anything else. So that was part of my, learning experience with Charlie Trotter, is also just, attention to detail and hard work, and how much you really got to focus on everything to make your place better than the next place, or something that's above average, let's say. At Jean-Georges, I got the more corporate experience in the best sense of the word. So systems of operation, or SOP, how to make a schedule, how to do inventory, not just for beverage, because I'd done that at Charlie Trotter, but linen inventory, a paper inventory, a china, glass, and silver inventory, and standardized operations. We had these little tiny wooden salt dishes, and the spoon had to go in a certain way. The salt, the teaspoon needs to be going from 12 o'clock on a clock to 3 o'clock on a clock and facing the same direction. So that was a good learning experience. It also really stepped up my management experience, because I was like a floor manager and there was an AGM above me, but the general manager position fluctuated for the whole time that I was there. They couldn't keep a GM for more than 2-3 months. So I don't really know why that was such a hard time for them, but the AGM kind of stepped into the GM role, and I was thrust into sort of an AGM role with less experience than somebody should have had in that kind of setting. But it teaches you to learn quickly, and it was a big team that we were managing, much larger than I had ever been exposed to there. Between breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and in-room dining, it was over 75 front of house employees. And then Locanda Verde, just, not that Jean-Georges and the Mark was not busy, it was, but nothing compared to the consistent volume that Locanda Verde did. Just busy at all times. Celebrities, events, it was a very demanding, there was no time where you could walk in and say, oh, well, it's going to be, we're not going to get busy until this time. It just was always busy at all times. And I think even a larger team than at the Mark, maybe, but hiring and staffing and scheduling and working at such a high volume establishment was a learning experience for me. So a composite of all of those did as much as they could to prepare me for opening and running my own business, but that's a whole nother animal that nothing could prepare you for.
I love this. Let's talk about you start at the bottom. You talked about polishing glasses. I don't even know what that totally is, but I think it's worth explaining. Obviously, it's glass work and fine dining is important. I didn't even think about the amount of time that it takes to do that in upscale dining, finer dining, to making sure that's all correct. Let's talk about sort of the how valuable it was for you to sort of start where you started and work your way up and gain the experience you did in what you do now as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, that was why I started working at Jean-Georges, because a lot of places after coming back from Charlie Trotter's wanted me to start at the bottom. I remember interviewing at 11 Madison Park, Will Guidara. He said, listen, you got great experience. Obviously, you're capable and everything like that, but everybody here starts at the bottom. I said, well, I'm not above that, but I already did that and I don't want to do that again. So I started as an entry-level manager at the Mark Jean-Georges when I got to New York, but I wouldn't be able to do what I do now if I didn't know how to do everything else. So I had no experience when I got to Charlie Trotter's. I'd never done anything in the restaurant before. In college at Tampa, I worked in a wine cellar, but it was like, I was like on a ladder pulling bottles and pouring wine by the glass. I never did anything guest facing. I didn't know how to bust a table. I didn't know anything. I didn't, I was learning about wine in college, but that was about it, and a very elementary sort of education. So, I worked every single position at Charlie Trotter's. I cleaned the dumpster in the back. I remember cleaning the little iron planter boxes. I helped with the floral arrangements. I chauffeured guest chefs. I polished glasses. I worked on events. I did every single thing that you could possibly do. So now, owning your own restaurant, if you have a busser that's polishing the glass the wrong way, like I know how to polish the glass. It's not like, I've seen, places open with people with funding that can open the restaurant, but have not done the work. I think that it makes a difference and the guests can see the difference.
That was what I was trying to get to. Thank you.
Yeah,
you hit that. You nailed it. Yeah. That includes polishing the glasses. It's one of the things that someone with money, or they throw someone in there that's not ready yet. The little things like that, the dust that collects, the whatever, what kind of restaurant's being run there.
Yep.
So for sure. The menu, let's talk about menu development. You come from the wine side of things. You experience chefs. You start to manage menus, stuff like that in the restaurants, spending a lot of time around them. Now you're going into your first restaurant. Let's talk, the first time. How do you sort of connect all the pieces together? And the first time, the wine, the menu, what idea do you have? How do you come up with a name? Let's sort of talk about how you sort of come out of the corporate world, for lack of a better term, or out of the more mainstream world, or working for someone else, into the independence and freedom that you have with all the suffering and headaches and all that come with it. But there is freedom. Talk to me about that.
A learning curve for certain. I mean, I'm not a chef, right? I like to think that I have a good palate, and my palate and ability to design a menu has improved over the course of the 10 years of the restaurant. But it's not easy to own and operate a restaurant when you're not a chef. I can't really jump, if one day nobody shows up for the front of the house for service, I might not be able to do 200 covers by myself, but I'm not the best bartender or barista, but in general, I can do everything in the front of the house. But if nobody shows up in the kitchen, I got a problem. That actually did happen one time. There was a good thing, there was a guy in the front of the house that could help me, and I was back there helping out. But that was a long time ago, and we weren't as busy as we are now. So we're lucky at Virginia's that over the course of 10 years, we've only had 1, 2, 3, like four or five chefs. And of those 5, there are a couple of them that didn't last very long. So we've been able to retain people for a long time, both front and back. But that chef position is one that's hard to fill, and you find somebody good, you try to keep them. But it's not always been easy. So when we opened the restaurant, the menu was not that dissimilar to what it is now in a lot of ways, a modern American bistro. But when we opened the restaurant, and this is not a diss on anybody, but our publicist at the time said, look, nobody's going to come to Avenue C for a pork chop. Nobody's going to come to Avenue C for a roasted chicken or steak frite, which is, kind of what our menu is now. And so we worked on this menu and we updated it, and we had blood sausage, and we had morcilla, and we had, duck, and not that duck's that exotic, but the preparation of it was exotic, and cuttlefish, and it was great. And it was, most of it was very, very good. I remember we had like a chocolate and beet cake that was good, but like it didn't really work. And then, a few months in, our publicist told us about all these food holidays. Today is National Chocolate Day. Tomorrow's National Vanilla. Today is National Burger Day. I said, okay, Burger Day. We're in America.
Yeah.
Let's do that. That makes sense. Let's do a burger for National Burger Day. Maybe that'll get some people in. And we did it. And I remember it was summertime, and it had heirloom tomatoes on it because we don't do tomatoes anymore. But it was, the same burger that we're doing now with Vidalia onion marmalade and a cloth-bound cheddar and a bone marrow mayonnaise on this brioche bun. And it just, people went crazy. But the chef at the time didn't want to be a burger place, and I guess neither did I to a certain extent. So we tried to shy away from it a little bit. The burger was available at the bar only, and then we did, I think, like on Monday nights or Tuesday nights was burger night. You could get it everywhere. And so the bar was always busy, and then Tuesday nights were busy, but I was still not smart enough to see that I should immediately embrace the burger and revolve the menu around it, partially because the chef never wanted to do it. So it took us, I don't know how long, but the business was suffering. All anybody wanted was the burger. So at a certain point, we did a pivot. I don't know if we closed for a couple of days, but we just, we announced, maybe we were closed for July 4th. We came back. We announced a new menu, a bistro type menu with, I don't remember exactly what was on the menu at that time, but the burger was the star of the show. Obviously, there were some other items that were all great, but the burger was the star of the show. And then it really started to take off from there and go in the correct direction. And so, when we reopened, obviously the burger was going to be the same. We didn't want to do the same menu. We wanted to do a new menu, but the burger and the fries couldn't change. So we designed a new menu, a American bistro style menu. So there's some, the only two things that are on the menu from the old restaurant are the burger and fries.
I love it. Talk to me about why transition the menu. What lessons learned from the old restaurant to the new restaurant? Differences in opening, differences in menu, differences in appearance, maybe, I don't know. But let's talk about lessons learned from the first one and the improvements on the second one, because I think those are valuable tidbits of information.
Well, the first one was more of an evolution, right? Over the course of 7 years. So we started with a completely different menu and then transformed into this bistro menu, switched chefs and switched some menu items. This version, the new version of Virginia's, I wanted to be more consistent. So the menu that we created is, there are things that aren't going to change. The crab cake is the crab cake. There's a recipe for it. Doesn't change. The steak frite is the steak frite. It's a classic for a reason. It's probably not going to change. The burger's not going to change. The risotto changes seasonally, but the format is the same. So it's not going to change. And we wanted it to be more consistent. And then we wanted the presentation to be upgraded a little bit, both on the beverage side and the food side. So when we were opening the restaurant, we took a lot more attention to detail to how we plate, what kind of plates we buy, what kind of glassware we're using, more so than the old Virginia's, which was a little bit more rustic. And again, maybe needed a little bit of a refresh. Not that it was not good. It was great. But, we wanted it to be a little bit more updated and elevated in this new location on all accounts, the aesthetic, the decor, and the presentation.
I love it. It's really cool. I'm looking at the menu now, the dinner menu. I see the burgers on there. There's truffle on here as well. Truffle risotto, during season, truffle burger, black truffle fries. All sound delicious. So I like the way the menu's done. Talk to me about the cocktails, wine menu, because you've obviously integrated that in with the food. That's something you started off in, but you've brought a wine menu in. You've brought things in for pairings. You got these pretty cool cocktails. Let's talk about how you come up with these concepts. Where do you come up with the ideas? How do you make sure it mixes well with the food?
Yeah, I mean, we tried to do more of an esoteric wine list with a lot of references at the old restaurant. For whatever reason, our target audience is more cocktail and beer focused than wine focused. So our wine is all either natural, organic, or biodynamic still, and they're all from small producers, but it's not quite as extensive as the list was at the old restaurant. A big part in the cocktail program is Evan Hawkins, who's my partner in Romeo's, who helped design the cocktail program at the New Virginias and really pushed me to elevate, everything. We had to get this special ice machine, which huge pain in the butt to get in, had to get these ice cubes that are sourced from off-site, and really upgrade the glassware program, which is a big upgrade from the last location, which I'm very excited about. The garnish, everything is, step up from the old one. Not that the old one was not good, but we didn't open with a liquor license. It took a year to get a liquor license, and then it was an evolution. So when you get to do it from scratch, you can do it from a new lens and try to improve upon where you were before.
I love it. Let's talk about where this goes from here. You've talked about you're involved in another restaurant, Romeo's. I believe it's in St. Mark's Place around there, right?
That's a bar.
Yeah. And so let's talk about other things you're involved in. Multiple restaurants, growing Virginia's. Like, what are the goals here? I'm sort of layering multiple things, probably in the reverse order.
No, you don't. But, I mean, I don't have anything in the works specifically yet. I'm looking, but I'm in less of a rush now with 2 kids and busy restaurant and some involvement in Romeo's. So I'm not going to rush into anything. I definitely rushed into the second Virginia's. It worked out. It was a big, big challenge with construction. I'm happy about where we are, and it's doing very, very well. But in hindsight, I might have done a little bit more due diligence to know what was going to be involved with the construction process. It's difficult anywhere in New York City, but this was particularly problematic. So I'm taking my time. I'd like to do another Virginia's because I see the demand for it. I think we do very well in the West Village. I think we do very well in certain parts of Brooklyn. I think we do well outside of the city. It's a relatable concept that travels. We have a brand that people know. If it's not another Virginia's, though, then I would like to do something that's more drink focused because, not that it's easy or easier, but I see what it's like to run a bar, and it's very different in terms of a labor perspective.
Yeah, the service is different, labor's different for sure. There's definitely better margins. I will say that against that labor.
Certainly come with their own challenges.
Yes.
But yeah, it's become very difficult in New York City. So
yeah, it's an interesting thing that's going on there, and the difficulties against doing business there just has become harder. It became harder every year I did business there. It's one of the reasons I do not do business there anymore, I should say, because the city in itself and the way it's run and the politics became harder and harder to deal with and less business focused and understanding of that they can just pull money out of tax dollars. We have to actually go make it as businesses. We have to hustle, and taking more and more away from us or making it difficult doesn't help us. doesn't create jobs. It doesn't create tax dollars for you guys to take money out of. So I don't understand the logic there, but if entrepreneurs, especially restaurants and food in New York City, aren't producing dollars and jobs, I don't know where the tax money is, because that's a majority of your population and workforce. So anyway, on to the next topic. I like this topic. I think it's very cool what you're doing. I love Alphabet City. There's a lot of hidden gems down there in terms of restaurants and places to eat, the East Village in general. I do like the West Village as well. I definitely spent a lot of time going all the way from Astoria, even there's a lot of good food there, going all the way down there to eat and stuff. And still, when I go into New York City, it's somewhere I spend time in. It's down in the East and West Village just because I like the food down there. I like the entrepreneurship that goes on down there. I like the creativity that goes on there. And something cool about New York City is because there's so many restaurants and because people are more transient on their feet, there's a lot of just cool concepts and specific things that they can narrow in on as restaurateurs and do very well in that. In a larger market outside of New York, it's a little bit harder, or even a smaller market where you have to offer more diversity. I like this. That's not what we're talking about here, but it's one of the reasons I like talking about New York City entrepreneurs, because it's such a different place and it breeds such creativity because of competition. So let's talk about you. Let's talk about family. Let's talk about businesses, like core values. Like, how do you run a business? How do you manage time with your family? How do you raise two children? Because it's hustle and bustle. It's high pace. You talked about all the time you spent in the business opening it. How do you manage all of it? Where do you find sort of grounding, peace, those type of things?
Yeah, so it's a conscientious effort because it's not my strong suit to balance those two. With the original location, when my son was born, I was back to work the next day, and that was not good for anybody. So COVID definitely gave me time to think and realize that, there has to be a balance. It was the first time that I really took any time off in a long time. So I'm doing a better job now of, trying to be realistic about when I have to be there, when I don't have to be there. So last week, my wife was sick, just the flu or whatever. My kid was sick. And I was headed out to work for this meeting that I could have done virtually. And, it's never been my style I'm much more of an in-person type leader or business person.
Me too.
I said, look, my kid's sick. I can do this virtually. I'm going to do this call, and then I'm going to stay home. And it's just, for me, I'd have to really remind myself sometimes that, yes, work is important and you got to be there, but you also have to be there for your family. So I've tried to be better at that lately. In terms of balance, I like to be at the restaurant when it's busy. I like to be there when it's slow as well, but, I like to be there as much as possible. But, after 10 years of doing it, if I have to be there to close and open the restaurant every day, then I'm not very good at my job. So we have some really good people that have been with me for a long time since the old restaurant. And then, even now we're coming up on 2 years. People have been with us since day one at the new location. So we have a good crew that I trust and that knows that I trust them, even if I am, OCD and annoying and I'm a pest. They know that I trust them to do the job well. So my big thing in a small place that is not Locanda Verde, which doesn't have the budget to afford a general manager, an assistant general manager, several floor managers, a beverage manager, so on and so forth. I'm all about empowering a smaller team to be autonomous. And, something that I learned for Charlie Trotter is that I try to instill in my team is like, yeah, you work for me, but if your only goal is to live up to my expectations of you, then you don't have high enough expectations for yourself. So if my expectations are here, yours need to be much higher than them.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I never thought about it that way, but it is 100% true. I like this. I got a lot of questions here around certain things, lessons. If you could go back to yourself when you opened the first one and tell yourself anything, three things that would have helped you then that you wish you knew then that you know now, what would they be?
I guess confidence in myself, not that I was lacking then. I don't think you can open a restaurant in New York City if you don't have confidence, but you know, it also comes from experience.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit less experienced then than I am now, but belief in yourself that you're making the right decision and following through with it. Sometimes, second guessing and indecision can cost you a little bit. Analyzing the numbers a little bit harder. Just focusing, not that we didn't open and do P&L meetings and that kind of thing, but paying closer attention to that. I guess I don't know. What did you ask? What are three lessons that I would have told myself when I opened the first restaurant?
Yeah, or things, helpful hints that you know now that you wish you would have known then.
I wish I could have gone back to myself before opening the restaurant and said, yeah, that's great. I know your rent is going to be cheap there, but the risk of the location is greater than the risk of the rent. So I would have liked to have opened originally in a better location.
Yeah, that's tough, but I think we all learn our lessons there in some way, shape, or form. That's just one of the ones we have to learn. We get a feel for what works for our restaurant, I think, sometimes, and we get a feel for what works for probably no restaurant being a location. But next question, the hiring of staff. You talked about quality people. You talked about training them, investing in them a little bit. Did the past teach you the present? How did you sort of walk your way through this? Because in a restaurant, particularly in New York City, it is very, very, very valuable to hold on to your staff for the long run because it is career positions and you want the best individuals. Talk to me about that, because I think it's very important what you just said before about holding on to your team.
Yeah. So from a server or a busser perspective, now pedigree is a little bit more important to me than it was when I opened the restaurant 10 years ago, because I can't be there quite as often. So I need a little bit more experience. But from a management perspective or a host perspective or an admin perspective, pedigree, resume is way less important than attitude and common sense, because I can teach and I can guide through that, especially from a management perspective. So, running this place is less about analyzing a P&L or making a schedule or payroll. It's more about sort of the combination of everything together. There's so many different aspects of it, from programming and marketing and social media and updating the website and updating your Google business hours if you're open for MLK when you're normally closed. It's about organization, common sense, and attitude. For me, is much more important than pedigree in a lot of ways.
I agree with you. The aptitude, capacity to learn, how they flex that muscle, how often, what does that look like?
And as cheesy as this sounds, a can-do attitude. I mean,
yeah,
I know that it's a cheesy phrase, but it really is important.
I agree. The reason it became cheesy is because people said it so often because it became so important. Still all the more important right now. This is very cool. Talk to me about sourcing for your restaurant, putting together menus. You talked a little bit about the wine and your customer base. I want to talk about sourcing, and I want to kind of take it into the food a little bit and then back out and talk about your perspective on customer service, how you train it, how you lead it, how your perspective on it, because I think you do very well on it. I just want to give an audience the idea of how you sort of get there? Because I think it starts with that idea of you already know what the customers want. You're doing it in the wine. So talk to me about the restaurant, the ingredients, the delivery, and sort of your view on customer service.
Yeah, I mean, it's about consistency, right? So we don't, when we opened Virginia's this second round, we tried really hard to, the burger is our number one selling thing by far. And we tried to bring the cost down on that. Tried all these different cheeses, tried all these different meat blends. We tried different bread because everything is very, very expensive. But ultimately, we couldn't sacrifice the ingredients for the product. So we kept it consistent. But in terms of a guest experience, it's tricky at Virginia's because you have people that come in and it's like a couple of buddies from college that come in and grab 2 burgers and beers and they're out in 30 minutes. But then you have people who come for their anniversary and get steak free and a bottle of wine and a couple glasses of champagne to start. So it's everything in between. And the thing that I try to tell my staff is like, what is it that's going to keep people coming back? Because if somebody gets an undercooked steak frite, they're not going to, or an undercooked burger or whatever, they're not going to write a nasty Yelp review, hopefully. They're not going to not come back just because of that. They're going to not come back because they had a bad experience, a bad service experience, and the steak frite or whatever was just the tip of the iceberg, right? That gave them the ammunition to say they're never going to come back because, the food was not as good as they had anticipated. But they're not going to do that if the service was good, right? If somebody gets an undercooked burger, but we go to the table and we see that they hadn't eaten it, we bring them another burger, or buy them dessert, or so on and so forth. We just make sure that they leave happy. People are going to come back, and they're going to forget about that undercooked burger. And also, our food is good. It's consistent, and that kind of thing happens rarely, which we're fortunate about. And the service staff is fortunate to have a kitchen that runs at a high level.
There's something I want to say to everyone, and this is true. I've learned this both in hospitality and hotels and food service and restaurants and food trucks. It doesn't matter where. The making amends when you screw up with a customer is huge. And it's not only should you make 100% amends, but you need to think about it that I'm already in the hole. I need to give at least another 10%, maybe more.
Also, a lesson I learned at Jean-Georges was, I think it was no table should go more than, I think, 30 seconds without being greeted. I think was one rule, which is like at least to get a water order, at least somebody touching the table in the first 30 seconds. And then nobody should wait more than 15 minutes for anything from the kitchen, with few exceptions. I remember we did a whole roast chicken or like a whole côte de boeuf at the Mark. And I think that if somebody orders a whole roasted chicken, it may take a little bit more than that. But that's something that we pay close attention to at Virginia's. It's like, if somebody sits down, orders a well-done steak and nothing else, that's probably going to take a little bit more than 15 minutes. But we'll, hopefully they'll get an appetizer first, which if you're doing your job correctly, between the appetizer and the entree, they're not going to wait more than 15 minutes in between courses or for anything. So timing is a big deal at the restaurant as well.
I think anyone who's not in the restaurant, I think food trucks, a lot of people experience this little phenomenon when they go into the restaurant. There's an orchestration that takes place in a restaurant that's way different. It's crazy to think about how fast it happens and how fast it peaks and how fast it comes off peak during especially dinner services and fine dining. But it is something cool to experience, and the orchestration, and when everything goes right, it's like playing sports and playing a perfect game. We may be imperfect as humans, but when you orchestrate things like in sports or in the dining experience, that you have almost those perfect days that every once in a while happen and then continue to happen as you build consistency and people get disciplined in their job and things like that. Do people have bad days and throw the thing off here and there? Of course, we're human. But there's this really cool orchestration that happens when everyone sort of falls into place in a business, and you can't see it better anywhere than that massive increase into a dinner service and then out of a dinner service as things sort of slow off. And it's just one of the coolest things to watch for anyone out there and anyone going into the restaurant business. Understand that it is an orchestration, a very well done, practiced orchestration that gets better time and time again as everyone works together, gets used to the balls. Oh, am I passing someone a hospital pass? Am I passing someone in my organization something that's going to harm a customer, and not doing it, passing my shift properly, passing my thing properly? And when that starts to happen, you actually build a company where everyone cares enough about the customers and the business where this orchestration takes place. That's what we're talking about here. That's why I asked those questions that I just asked. What we're talking about here is an orchestration. So, favorite things about being an entrepreneur, favorite things about the business right now. Talk to me about that.
Well, the pros and cons to being an entrepreneur and sole proprietor. One is that I can do whatever I want, come and go as I want, take medication whenever I want, but you never really get a full vacation, right? Like, the only time that I turned my phone off was when we used to close for a week for 4th of July. We don't do that anymore because we're so busy. So it's a good problem to have. You know, I've recently promoted somebody to manager. So she is helping to take some of the administrative things off my plate. But, you know, that's the double-edged sword, right? You can do whatever you want, but you're always solely responsible. So, you know, you can empower people, but at the end of the day, if nobody shows up, what are you going to do? So, you know, I think the thing that makes me most proud is seeing the place full. Yes, but I get, you know, we had our holiday party for the staff the other day, and it's a bigger staff now than it ever has been. And seeing people that come to work, wanting to work, happy to work, and excited about their job and making good money is something that I'm very proud of. I mean, you know, if you're nobody without your employees, and you want them to be happy. So for the team to be happy and wanting and eager to come to work is a big compliment to me.
This is a term I always laugh at when someone says or asks if I'm self-made or someone else is self-made. Yeah, there's truth to it. You're an entrepreneur, but there are a lot of employees and a lot of people that taught us along the way. And without them, there is no quote unquote self-made. But That's the point that I think you're trying to make as well. Right. You have a lot of support. You have a lot of good employees. You have a lot of people that believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
The last question I have for you today, your family unit, all of it, you're constantly coming and going. We just talked about trying to find vacation, running a business 24/7. Actually, I'm going to anchor this question for a second. Being an entrepreneur, you tend to work more hours than normal. An 8-hour work week, an 8-hour work day doesn't exist, and it exists in some ways. In some ways, do you have days that you only are busy 4 hours, but then you're answering phone calls all day? Sure. But then there are days that you're working 20 hours. Both are true as an entrepreneur. But I think overall, we just stack more time in our businesses and in our industries than someone who's not in the entrepreneurial role, that doesn't feel that responsibility, that isn't solely responsible. And so when Reed says, you know, who's going to do it, that's part of the thing of the entrepreneur. If we don't do it, no one's going to do it. There's a level of care and a level of business which no one understands or can fathom if you're not doing it. You don't learn it until you're actually an entrepreneur, and all that pressure falls on you to the level at which it falls, especially with success. As business grows, you do better. You have loyalty long term. You get to know people. You get to know their families. You get to know the vendors. You get to know your vendors' families, and all these people are depending on you to do your job, to keep the customers happy. So everyone keeps their legacy going and their careers and growth. And maybe it's just a stepping stone, but at least it's a healthy one. And so let's talk a little bit about educating yourself, knowledge, growth. How do you keep in the forefront of growth and knowledge, Reed, in your business right now? Because the restaurant business is changing all the time. the cocktails change, the trends change, all of those things. So how do you stay educated, knowledgeable, and in tune with some of those to make sure your restaurant sort of falls along? Obviously, you have the burger, which is your consistency, but there's obviously things that are going on that you're mindful of. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get out there. You got to try to travel as much as possible. It's tough with 2 kids, but I've been trying to go and experience as many new places as possible, which for me is really just like once a week, which is tough. I think that a big part of it for me is talking to colleagues who own places and seeing what they're doing, what they're learning from, what is working for them, what's new, what's changed. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? That's been a big tool of mine, to have different colleagues who own and operate different businesses, and to see and hear from them what they're doing is helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think networking, learning through anything you can, peers, whether it's podcasts, whether it's people in your industries, face to face is my way number one always for me. But I know a lot of people learn in different ways. A second for me is definitely books, and then third is like audio stuff, maybe podcasts, books on tape. But I learn much more from people. That's why I do the podcast. Also, I talk to a lot of people. I learn a lot of things from here. And obviously now I'm translating that through my own experience into Gorilla Brave, so we can use the entrepreneurs that are on the show, the shows, my experience, academia, all the academics that are out there that have written about this stuff in restaurants and stuff like that, magazines, blah, 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 and cross-referencing all of it to make sure that what's going on is legitimate information. I find a lot of social media stuff is not true as we think it is. We're not referencing it or putting in a foundation. So that's what we're trying to do. That's the reason I'm doing these shows. I'm learning also. It's out of my curiosity. That curiosity is turned into something everyone is learning from and demanding the information from. So we never know where we're going to go with something. We just need to continue, and there's always purpose in it. And I think one of the reasons I like what Reed's doing and I like what they've done is his story we just talked about. He adapted to something. It's okay in our restaurants to adapt to a popular food. There will be a food or something, if we're doing our job well and we're constantly creating and we're listening to the trends or what's popular or what our customers are asking for or telling us by merely spending their dollars, what the best thing on our menus are. And those are the areas of our menus to capitalize on, maybe even restructure, maybe even use it. Yeah, are you doing well? You can do better when you focus on what are my customers telling me? What are the trends telling me? What does this look like? How can I test it without upsetting everyone? Or maybe I do test it in a way that's loud and it's a special of the month. I don't know, but there's ways that we need to do it. You just need to be in tune. So lastly, Reed, I know I said that was my last question. I do have one more. How do you stay in tune with your customers? We talked a little bit about trends and your other individuals, but how do you actually stay in that feedback loop with your customers, hearing things, getting feedback from your employees who get feedback from your customers?
Yeah, I mean, there's several ways. One is by looking at the reviews that are posted and taking them seriously and replying to every single one of them, positive or negative. The other is by being hands-on and by being there and asking how everything went. And did you have a good time? Was the service up to par? And there's no better way to do that than by actually physically being there. But also, I listen to what my team says a lot. They're, we're doing Restaurant Week starts today, and we are doing an off-menu smash burger. And we did this in the summer. We're doing it again now for Winter Restaurant Week. And apparently the biggest complaint from last Restaurant Week is that people felt they got shorted, cheated with the portion size of the smash burger because it was too small. And they suggested that we do a double smash. And I learned this by way of my team. They told me that. They shared the guest feedback. So we're doing a double smash burger, twice the size for this Restaurant Week. So it's, you got to listen, you got to pay attention, you got to take criticism well, because if you don't have thick skin, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, you got to be able to filter it out of the motion, out of what's coming at you, filter the emotion out and just hear the words. It's a big thing.
And adjust too, right? Like if you think that a fried chicken sandwich is going to be great and you put it on the menu and it doesn't sell, like maybe the fried chicken sandwich is not good, or people don't like fried chicken sandwiches, or whatever it is. Our fried chicken sandwich is great. It sells fabulously. I couldn't think of a better example, but whatever it is, you have to be flexible and malleable at all times.
Reed, is there anything you want to share, Reed, before you get off? And also, could you share your information, website, location, social media as well? And then, like I said, anything you'd want to share with the audience that you think might help the audience in any way?
No, I really appreciate you taking the time to have me on the show. Virginia is in the East Village of Manhattan at 200 East 3rd Street near Avenue B. You can find us online, virginiasnyc.com, or on social media at virginiasnyc. We're open 6 nights a week. We're closed on Mondays. That's soon to change. We are open for brunch on Saturday and Sunday as well.
Very cool. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. Everyone in the audience, I love you guys. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you for the recommendations. If you're an entrepreneur, there is a link in the show notes. You can click on that as well. And also, as I said on the last podcast, for the last 2024 and into 2025 now, there are summaries in each episode in the show notes, and each episode has a timeline breakdown of the episode with little notes. So if you want to jump back, remember a piece, get an educational piece, a nugget, a carrot, whatever you call it, you can do that now. There is those timestamps in there for you guys. I couldn't think of the term in the last podcast. It was early in the morning. I wasn't functioning yet, but that is, so I will say it again. You want to jump around to the episodes. You want to go back and listen to things or find things you heard. There is that in there for 2024 and anything moving forward into 2025. So you have that also, as you guys asked for, there is the show notes. So you can look at the show notes of the episode and briefly go through it if you want, because I know we release episodes often and every other day, and it's a lot. So there are notes in there if you wanted to pick your way through episodes. I recommend listening to them all, but I'm obviously biased. So, and I know time is valuable. So don't get me wrong. That's why we did it that way. We gave you the ability to have cliff notes to hyper or speed up your education or ability to get to the information you're looking for. Context is obviously key. So listening to entrepreneurs tell it is important, but the information is in there to go back and find if you want to find it. And also it's all being translated, obviously cross-pollinated through the show, through academia, and then through my experience into Gorilla Brave for everyone, because that, from the low-hanging fruits going out first, the entrepreneurs trying to get into the game, there's a lot of information coming out for you guys first, because that's the biggest demand and the loudest voices I hear right now. So we'll start there. It'll get more complicated as time goes on. Thank you everyone for listening, and thank you, Reed, again. Cannot wait to hopefully get you back on maybe after the summer and hear about what you have going on and have things moving forward. So I'd love to tell a part 2 as well for you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you everyone for listening in, and we're out.